I'm 30 years old and reside alone in a modest two-story home in Concord, New Hampshire. The neighborhood is peaceful, the type where neighbors nod at each other while passing by, yet they remain strangers. I work as a software engineer and typically spend my evenings working well into the night. However, I've found that the hours between midnight and 4 a.m. have started to become unsettling for me. This unsettling feeling began about a month ago, just a few days after moving in. One night, after completing my work, I settled down to watch a quick episode of a show before heading to bed. Just as I was getting comfortable, my doorbell rang. It wasn't out of the ordinary for someone to visit at odd hours, so I checked the camera footage. To my surprise, there was no one at the door. Initially, I brushed it off as some glitch with the camera system, maybe a reflection or a shadow from a streetlight. But then it happened again the very next night, precisely at 3 a.m. I checked the footage, and once more, there was nothing. The motion sensors remained inactive. Just a long, empty clip until the doorbell rang again at the exact same time. By the third night, it was really starting to get to me. I began staying up later, watching the live feed from the doorbell camera, anticipating something, anything. But night after night, I was met with nothing. The porch remained empty, illuminated only by the faint glow of the streetlights outside. Yet, I could hear the ring as if someone was standing at my door, staring at it and waiting. I tried discussing it with a few neighbors, but they looked at me as if I were losing my mind. Their suggestions ranged from thinking it could be a prank to hypothesizing a malfunction in my doorbell system. But I knew it had to be more than that. I wasn't imagining things. It wasn't just the sound. It was the timing, a perfectly precise pattern, happening exactly at 3 a.m. each night without fail. One night, determined to get a closer look, I sat quietly in the living room with the lights dimmed, waiting for the doorbell to ring. As the clock approached 2:59 a.m., my heart raced, and my eyes were glued to the doorbell camera feed on my phone. Then, right on cue, the doorbell rang. I paused, staring at the live footage. The porch was empty, devoid of any presence. No movement, no shadows, just the typical stillness of a cold New Hampshire night. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, notifying me of a new alert. The doorbell had been rung again, but the timestamp showed 3:01 a.m. I rechecked the feed, still nothing. Anxious, I stepped outside to inspect the porch, yard, and street, but found no signs of anyone. Just the gentle rustle of the trees and the wind swirling around. A nagging feeling persisted, as if someone or something was watching me. I returned inside and secured the door behind me. It had escalated. It was no longer just the doorbell. The subsequent nights blurred together in a haze of apprehension and dread. Each night, the doorbell rang at 3 a.m. without fail, but there was never anyone there. I tried to convince myself it was a malfunctioning doorbell or perhaps interference from a neighbor's system. However, the timing was far too precise, and each time, I felt that haunting sensation of being watched. Finally, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I set up a motion-activated camera in my backyard, aimed directly at the porch, telling myself that if I captured anything on video, I would involve the police regardless of how ridiculous it sounded. I needed answers. That night, as the doorbell rang as usual, I leapt out of bed, heart racing, and checked footage from both cameras. The motion camera detected movement. Something had appeared on the porch, but as I replayed the video, dread filled my stomach. It wasn't a person or a shadow. The footage showed the light of the doorbell flickering in and out of focus as if being disturbed by something invisible. The porch looked utterly empty. I struggled to comprehend what I was witnessing. The timestamps were unmistakable, 3 a.m., same as before. My mind raced with scenarios. Perhaps someone had tampered with the camera, or maybe a neighbor was executing a complicated joke. But none of it added up. Whoever or whatever was behind this had been alarmingly consistent. That night, I tossed and turned, waking up every hour to check my phone. The relentless ringing continued, and the sense of unease grew stronger. Around 3:30 a.m., I heard faint tapping on the window. It started softly but grew louder, resembling someone gently knocking from outside. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled out of bed to investigate. But once again, outside was just empty. No one there, only the faint glow of streetlights illuminating the quiet driveway. A chill crept up my spine. The silence was almost overwhelming, but then I noticed something. A shadow moving along the far side of the house for just a brief moment. My breath hitched in my throat as I grabbed the nearest flashlight and dashed outside, illuminating every direction. But when I stepped onto the porch, everything remained still as well. No sounds, no movement, just the unnerving quiet that had settled into my nights. It felt as if I was losing my grip on reality. The tapping on the window hadn't been a figment of my imagination. Someone or something had indeed been there. I returned inside, locked the door, and tried to dispel the rising panic. I set up my phone camera to record the porch overnight, hoping to capture something that would finally shed light on this disturbing experience. The next morning, I was drained, but the footage awaited me. I watched it with a heavy feeling in my chest. The camera didn't initially capture any movement on the porch, but then just after 3 a.m., the doorbell rang again. I was already engulfed by that familiar dread, but what I witnessed next was worse than anything I could have feared. The footage revealed the doorbell flickering once more, and then the camera turned towards the porch. But there was something else in the video, a figure. It stood precisely in the spot where the doorbell would ring, yet it wasn't solid. It appeared faint, as if composed of smoke or mist, barely forming a shape. Its outline was blurry and distorted. My throat constricted as I observed it slowly glide toward the door. Felt like a dream, the kind where you're paralyzed, unable to scream, yet every part of you is filled with terror. The figure didn't touch the doorbell but hovered right in front of it. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I had to comprehend what I was witnessing. My hands trembled as I zoomed in on the figure. That's when I noticed it. Its face, or what should have been a face. It was entirely featureless. There were no distinct traits, just a smooth, blank surface in place of a human face. I froze, my mind racing. I struggled to breathe. What was I supposed to do? I attempted to call my wife, but the phone kept dropping the call. The connection had been fine just moments ago, yet now there was nothing. My stomach churned, and a cold sweat began to form on my skin. I wanted to escape. I wanted to flee as far away as possible from this house, from whatever was stalking me. I grabbed my car keys, prepared to leave. But before I could reach the doorbell rang again. I could hear it distinctly. My legs felt as if they were made of stone. My feet were stuck to the floor. Gradually, I turned back and stared at the camera feed once again. The same figure, but now it was right in front of the door. It was looking straight into the camera. Its blank face, those empty, soulless eyes fixed on me through the lens. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It only stared. I couldn't take it anymore. I dashed out of the house, sprinted to my car, and didn't look back. I drove aimlessly. The only sound was the thudding of my heart pounding in my ears. I have no idea how long I drove or where I ended up, but I knew one thing. I couldn't return. I couldn't confront whatever was in my house. I've avoided it for several days now, but I still haven't confided in anyone. I'm too frightened. The doorbell continues to ring every night at 3 a.m. But now I don't review the footage anymore. I can't. I've seen more than enough. Some things are simply too disturbing to unsee. I'm a 29-year-old paramedic living in Tallahassee, Florida. My spouse had left the day before to visit her family in Miami, so I had the house all to myself for a few nights. We don't have children yet, and with my busy work schedule, I was looking forward to some peace and quiet. Little did I know that silence can sometimes be the most unnerving thing. Our neighborhood is the type where neighbors wave at one another while tending to their gardens. It's mostly older retired couples and young families, and it has been quiet ever since we moved in. Our backyard isn't large, just enough grass to mow along with a wooden shed in the corner. That shed was part of the property when we bought it. We hardly ever used it except to store old items. That Friday night, I was half watching a suspenseful movie on the couch with the lights dimmed. It was past 11, and the house had that heavy quiet that fills the air when you're alone. I decided to pause the film to grab some water from the kitchen. As I walked through the house, something compelled me to look at the back window. At first, I thought it was just the moonlight reflecting off the shed's window. But when I looked again, I noticed a figure standing just inside the shed. It was completely still, didn't move or sway, just stood there in the dark. I paused, wondering if I was imagining things. I turned on the porch light and cautiously approached the glass door. The shed was about 20 feet from the house, but I couldn't make out details from that distance. I kept staring, trying to figure out what I was seeing. It looked like a person standing just behind the slightly open door of the shed. I stood frozen at the door, my hands still clutching the glass. No one should have been back there. Our yard is enclosed by a fence. I considered the possibility of a prank or perhaps a drunken neighbor, but that didn't feel right. The figure was too motionless, too perfectly positioned, like it was waiting. I locked the sliding door and stepped back a few paces. My phone was resting on the coffee table, but I hesitated to grab it. Calling the police seemed like an overreaction, especially since I wasn't even sure of what I was seeing. Nonetheless, there was something about the way that figure stood that made my stomach churn. I turned off the porch light and moved to the side of the window. Maybe it was wiser for them to think no one was watching. I kept glancing between the shed and my phone screen, trying to decide what action to take. Then, as I looked again, the figure was simply gone. One moment it was there, the next moment the shed was empty. I blinked rapidly and rubbed my eyes, trying to convince myself I had imagined it all. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. I had seen it clearly just moments earlier. I remained by the window for a while, waiting for any sign of movement. The backyard was silent. No wind, no sound, just the soft hum of the porch light. I didn't want to go outside, but I also didn't want to ignore it. Eventually, I drew the curtain closed and stepped back. Back in the living room, I muted the TV and sat down slowly. The movie was still paused, but I couldn't concentrate on it anymore. I kept checking my phone as if I were anticipating something to shift. Part of me hoped it had really just been my imagination. After at least 10 minutes of sitting like that, I stood up again. I walked back to the kitchen window, pulled the curtain aside a bit, and peered out. The shed door was now completely shut, even though I distinctly remembered it being ajar before. That's when my fingers turned icy. I flicked on the outside floodlight and stared intently, trying to detect any movement in the shadows. Everything appeared still, no figure, no signs of anyone. I wanted to open the door and investigate, but something deep inside advised against it. Instead, I locked the door again and pulled both curtains tight. That night, sleep eluded me, despite my attempts. I lay in bed, scrolling through my phone, rereading messages from my spouse, checking our security app. We had a camera at the front entrance, but not in the backyard. I made a mental note to address that if I made it through the weekend. Around 2 a.m., I thought I heard something outside my bedroom window, a faint scratching sound as if someone was brushing against the side of the house. I froze in bed, listening closely with my heart racing. Then it stopped. I remained still for another 15 minutes. Eventually, I got up and checked every room, turning on lights one by one. I found nothing amiss inside, and there were no signs of a break-in. I stood at the hallway window, gazing out at the shed which still appeared undisturbed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Just to be cautious, I grabbed my keys and headed to the garage. I keep a small toolkit and a crowbar in there for work-related tasks. I wasn't keen on confronting anyone, but I also didn't want to be caught unprepared. I brought the crowbar back inside and set it near the couch. Eventually, I nodded off on the couch around 4 a.m. The TV still played softly in the background, but I woke up again just before sunrise. Not because of a noise, but because I felt an unsettling sensation that someone had been watching me while I slept. The room felt thick with an unsettling presence. I awoke slowly and glanced toward the window. The curtain was slightly ajar, as if someone had tugged it from outside. My heart began to race again. I carefully approached the window, dreading what I might see, yet knowing I had to look. The shed stood open once more, and I was certain it had been shut when I checked earlier. I rubbed my eyes to ensure I was truly awake. This time, I didn't hesitate. I slipped on my shoes and took the crowbar. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I unlocked the back door, stepped outside, and made my way toward the shed, keeping an eye on every shadow. The wet grass felt cold beneath my feet, and the air was heavier than usual. I reached the shed door and paused, listening intently. There was no sound inside, no movement, no breathing, no creaks. I tapped the crowbar against the door frame and pushed it open wider. The interior was filled with the usual clutter. Tools, boxes, and old camping gear. Everything seemed normal. I stood there for a moment, trying to decide if this was merely a prank from a neighbor or something more sinister. Then I spotted them. Footprints on the dusty floor that definitely weren't mine. They led from the back wall to the door, and I hadn't gone that way. Someone had been in there, facing the wall while I was inside. That realization hit me hard. Whoever it was had been hiding in the shed while I was unaware. I quickly stepped back, locked the shed, and checked the fence. There were no broken boards, no obvious entry points. I even walked around the house to see if anything looked off. Everything seemed too normal. Back inside, I sat down with my coffee and gazed at the backyard for a long while. I considered calling the police, but what would I even say? That someone might have been in my shed last night? They would probably laugh me off. When my wife returned that evening, I didn't share everything. I told her just enough to explain why I had installed a motion light and a new camera in the backyard that day. I wanted to avoid scaring her, but I also didn't want her to think I was paranoid for no reason. A few days later, I checked the camera footage out of routine. One clip caught my eye from that morning around 5 a.m. A man stood near the shed, watching the house without moving for over 5 minutes. He eventually turned and walked away, but not toward the gate. Instead, he walked past the side of the shed and vanished behind it, and the camera didn't capture him leaving. I rewound it and watched it again frame by frame. He was there, then he wasn't. I never saw him again, and nothing else happened after that. But occasionally, I find the shed door open in the morning. It doesn't happen all the time, but enough to make me wonder if he's still out there, watching from a place I can't see. I now sleep with the curtains closed and haven't watched a late-night movie alone since. I double-check the locks before bed, often more than once, because even though I never caught him, I know what I saw, and I know he saw me too. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe. I was 13 when this incident occurred. Living in Springfield, Massachusetts with my mom, younger brother, and our golden retriever, Buddy. My bedroom was located upstairs at the end of the hallway, directly across from a small and used closet. The ceiling in my room had a peculiar slant, and it always felt a bit chillier than the rest of the house. That evening began like any other, until Buddy started acting strangely. He followed me about halfway up the stairs as usual, then stopped right outside my bedroom door. I called for him to come inside and even patted the floor to entice him, but he wouldn't move. His ears were flat against his head and his gaze was fixed on something above the door frame. Then he emitted a low growl I had never heard from him before. At first, I thought maybe there was a bug or a small creature in the room. I turned on the lights and checked under the bed and in the closet. Nothing. Buddy remained hesitantly outside. He stood completely still, eyes locked on the ceiling as if he was anticipating something to change. I left the door ajar and climbed into bed, but I couldn't help but keep glancing at Buddy through the crack. He stayed there for over an hour, barely blinking, never taking his eyes off the ceiling. Eventually, I fell asleep, accompanied by an unsettling feeling of being watched from above. When I woke up, Buddy was gone, but my door still stood wide open. The next morning, I asked my mom if Buddy had slept downstairs. She nodded, explaining that he had been restless all night and even barked at nothing in the hallway. I examined the hallway ceiling where he had been focused. It was just an old piece of drywall. No stains, no cracks, nothing unusual to see. That afternoon, I decided to hang out in my brother's room to avoid my own. As we watched television, Buddy lay peacefully beside us, utterly at ease. However, The moment I stepped toward my room to grab a sweater, he jumped up and growled again. It wasn't loud, just a low warning. I hesitated, looking up, and once more saw nothing. Just the same yellowed ceiling with a faint circle where the light fixture used to be. I quickly grabbed my sweater and backed out of the room, feeling Buddy lean against my leg as if to protect me. That night, I chose to sleep on the couch. My mom didn't believe anything was wrong, but she noticed Buddy's sudden change in behavior, too. He refused to go near my room, not even to chase a ball that rolled inside. By the third day, I started keeping the door closed just to feel safer. Still, I caught Buddy staring at the gap under it. One night, I woke to the hallway light flickering, though I hadn't turned it on. The room was dim, and shadows danced oddly across the ceiling. Then, I heard a soft creaking sound, slow and spaced out, coming from right above my bed. It wasn't the house settling. I froze under the blanket, my heart racing. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. The creaking continued for about 10 seconds before stopping as abruptly as it started. My eyes fixated on the corner of the ceiling, waiting for something to reveal itself. The next morning, I checked the attic. The only access point was a small panel near the linen closet, too far from my room to correspond with where I had heard the noises. There were no loose boards, no signs of mice, no droppings. It looked like it hadn't been disturbed in years. I began to notice small oddities. My phone would vibrate inexplicably when I walked into the room, even with no notifications. Once, I found my closet door open when I was certain I had closed it. Buddy never barked, but every night without exception, he sat across from my door, watching. One weekend, my cousin stayed over. I didn't mention anything. I didn't want to sound insane. We were playing video games late when Buddy suddenly growled deeply. Then, the ceiling above us popped loudly, as if someone had stomped hard right above. My cousin looked at me seriously and asked, "Is someone up there?" I shook my head, trying to laugh it off, but he wasn't convinced. We both stood there for a while, staring at the ceiling. Buddy growled again, then barked sharply. We turned off the game and left the room. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Around 3:30 a.m., I heard my bedroom door creak open slowly, despite knowing I had locked it. I remained on the couch, clutching my blanket tightly, too frightened to move. After that night, I finally told my mom everything. She didn't say much, but a couple of days later, she brought home a priest. He performed a brief blessing of the room, mumbled some prayers, and sprinkled holy water in the corners. Buddy didn't bark, but he remained tense. The strange noises ceased, but Buddy still wouldn't enter my room. Eventually, I moved into the guest room, leaving my old room untouched. We never stored anything in there again. My mom ultimately referred to it as the spare room. Now that I'm older, we've moved out of that house long ago. Yet, to this day, Buddy won't enter any room that has a particular odor, like old wood and dust mixed together. Sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I can hear creaking above me. There are some things dogs can sense that we can't, instincts that are beyond explanation. Whatever Buddy saw or sensed remains a mystery,